Okay, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. I think we still have a few people coming in the waiting room. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Austin Case and I'm the marketing manager at Gauge. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you could just please ensure that you stay on mute throughout the webinar so that all your fellow attendees are able to hear. And then if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please just drop those in the chat box. I will be monitoring those during the webinar. And then we'll also have some time for questions at the end. So I know everyone is excited to jump into the trends and the data. So I would love to introduce one of my favorite people, Suzanne Wilson. So Suzanne joined Gauge as our Chief Marketing Officer in 2018, and then she was appointed Chief Operating Officer in January 2022. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in English from the University of Utah in 2003 and achieved an Executive MBA from the University of Utah Eccles School of Business with the class of 2017. She has worked in oral health for much of her career, holding leadership positions in operations, contract negotiations, business and product development, marketing and commercialization, working for global medical device and technology firms. So with that, Suzanne, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Austin, and welcome everyone. It's so great to be here. I'm excited to have you all and dive into some fun things today. So again, appreciate the very kind introduction, Austin. I am based in Utah. This is a picture of me and my family in Hawaii, though. But go Utes. We might actually make it this year. We hit the Rose Bowl last year, and it was kind of a big deal for all of us locals. So that's where I'm born and raised, and I'm lucky enough to still live here with my family. As Austin mentioned, I've been in the field for some time. I'm actually getting to that age where I probably need to start fudging the numbers a little bit. I don't want everyone to start doing math on me, but I've worked at some great companies like Ultradent, Ormco, and of course my favorite of all, Gauge. And in the last, several years, I feel like I've learned so much over my career, but something sort of surprised me. The kids, they actually get bigger than you eventually. So here you see my 18-year-old Sam on the end with the curly hair. He's actually heading to University of Utah in a couple of weeks. My youngest, Alex, is going to be a junior, and then, of course, my husband, Dwight. So just wanted to share a little bit about what wakes me up in the morning and the people that fill my heart with joy. So that's my family and one of our favorite places. As a little disclaimer, most of you, I think, probably have some knowledge, some understanding of what Gauge is. I know we have many clients on the call. It's so wonderful to see you all and see your names. But for those of you that are not familiar, I just wanted to provide a short introduction about who we are and what we do. Gauge is a business solutions company. We are committed to providing business intelligence, efficiency solutions. We have a bunch of tools and new products that we also will share a little bit about later. This presentation is largely about statistics and the economy and what's happening in the marketplace. But we also have a couple of solutions that we think help orthodontists run their business a little bit better. And if there's any way we can help you, we just want to make sure you're aware of those details. So let's hop into our topics. We're going to talk about what is happening in the economy. I think most of us have some general knowledge, general understanding of what's going on. If we're not living under a rock and hiding from the news, which I do sometimes, but we're gonna actually talk through everything that's kind of happened in the industry through Q2. What are some key findings, and what are some actions that we can take? Sorry, I just got to move my camera out of the way. It's sort of distracting me there. Seeing myself on screen, not always fun. And then we will end the presentation with some takeaways and outlook. So what are kind of the key things? A summary of what we've discussed, and then what's ahead for all of us. So let's start talking about the state of the economy. This is obviously an extremely complicated topic. We are mostly focused on the US here. We know that there are some international inputs into our economy, especially related to the war in Ukraine, other things related to energy, oil and gas. We're not going to talk broadly. We're going to talk a little bit more about our own, the US country anyway. I know we may have some people from out of the country, but this will be focused along what's happening in the US. And the economy is about marketplace, but it's also very much about how people behave in that marketplace. The flow and exchange and goods, it's all dependent on the moves that people make. So we have, I would say, generally returned to a relatively normal way of living, as we say normal, right? We're still dealing with COVID. We're now in sort of this post-pandemic normalization of all things. That includes the markets, that includes our behaviors, that includes businesses being open. Inflation is a topic of significant interest to all of us, and everybody that drives a car that uses gas, or those that don't and are pointing and laughing at us that do. It's not news. It is higher than expected. It's had a big impact on consumer spending. It's had an impact on the investment market. We've seen the stock market fluctuate in crazy ways, and it's even influenced some of the M&A activity going on. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that, and we're gonna talk about some specific metrics that consumers are experiencing and how it's impacting our businesses. And then the word recession. This, I think we all felt like, yeah, we're headed for a recession. We've had 2 quarters of consecutive downturn. That is the definition of a recession. However, 2 quarters of consecutive downturn as it compares to last summer and spring, that was an anomaly. That was really sort of crazy in a way, and crazy in a good way, but it didn't represent any kind of a normal market. And we had, super significant change to the marketplace with the pandemic. So economists, for the most part, I know this is debated, but for the most part, they're not saying we are in a recession at this moment, primarily because of what we were comparing to. And, I'm talking about normal. What is normal? Well, we're going to do some comparisons. We're going to look a little bit back further in history, and I want us to sort of level set how we're feeling. It doesn't feel normal. I think it feels stressful to some degree. I think there's opportunity that's unique. That doesn't feel normal. And I think there's worry. And I think the worry is really fair. So whether or not we're normal, I think what we need to do is just accept that this is the way it is, and we're going to keep moving forward, and we're going to move forward with our eyes open with as much knowledge as we can. So this is a map, slightly outdated now, but based on consensus of population growth from 2015 to 2020. But we've essentially seen more of the same since this was published. So areas where you see the dark green and higher growth continued to grow, but we actually saw some declines in other states. I'll show you on the next slide. People began exiting these large cities with expensive rents and 10 square feet to go to places where there was a little bit more space, real estate was a little bit more affordable. And then of course that caused a housing boom in some of these markets. So, everything's kind of ebbing and flowing as people are migrating across the United States. What this means to us is more workers, more consumers, taxpayers, home buyers for those states that are growing. For those states that are losing, well, obviously then you're losing the same. This map actually illustrates the change where it's most significant in the top 10 states for inbound and outbound. When we think about this for the numbers, California losing 0.8% is going to be a larger number than, say, Utah gaining 2% as it relates to the total population of the state. So keep that in mind. It's not like California is suddenly, there's no traffic. It's not that kind of a situation, but it is really interesting just thinking about each of us in our respective markets. And how this can visualize the change that we may be seeing. Midwest remaining relatively flat for the most part with some migration here and there. Okay, so we have sort of a lay of the land, as it were. So let's think about some of the business pain points that we're facing. We are all experiencing this slowing and this softening of the market. We've been experiencing labor shortages. This is not unique to us. It is across pretty much every industry. There have been labor shortages. A number of reasons why, and we won't go into great detail on this, but the Great Resignation that I'm sure you've read about, people sort of job hopping or saying, you know what, this isn't for me. The pandemic made me realize X, Y, and Z. So labor shortages. Then you also have actual sickness, wellness, loss of population. So labor has also affect supply chain. It's not just about, do we have the bodies to fill the needs and the resources in our business, but now supply chains are shut down. We don't have the people, or everybody's out with COVID. So, this supply chain issue has definitely influenced everything that we're experiencing in the marketplace, from an inflation standpoint, from a long lead time standpoint, the prices, all the things. So all of this is kind of working together, and it's ebbing and flowing. So when we've had this growth period, well, now we're pulling demand on labor and supply chain and so on and so forth. So then inflation's going up. So now that we see the slowing of the market, it's kind of, kicking us in the gut in one way, but in another way, this is the cyclicality that you want. This is the cyclicality that's expected. So let's talk a little bit more about what this looks like as far as business cycles go. And this is from a really super fruitful, insightful source. ITR is an economic firm. They lecture all over the world, and they provide reports and guidance and things like that. And at Gage, we tend to want to understand what our market is doing, but also what the greater, broader market is doing. So we've done a lot of self-learning and research through this source. Highly encourage anybody that's interested in this type of thing to check them out. They're amazing. So you're going to see some of if you go check them out, you'll see some of these things come up and be familiar. So when we look at the business cycles, we have phase A, which is recovery. So annual sales are below a year ago, and the rate of decline is slowing. So it's telling us we're actually kind of starting to come back up and out. This is often following a recession. Then you have phase B, accelerating growth. Annual sales are above a year ago levels, growing at a rapid pace. This is when we're all high-fiving each other and throwing bonuses to the sales team and everybody else, and we're all excited and things are going great. And it's almost the American way that we want to live in this space. This is how we like to feel. This is what feels right. This is what's pushed on us. So accelerating growth, but it isn't realistic to think that you can always live in this space, that there's always going to be a supply demand push-pull. So then you have phase C, slowing growth. Spoiler, this is kind of where we are. Annual sales are above a year ago levels, but the rate of growth is slowing. So in some cases, our sales are not above last year. In some industries, and for many of us, we're not seeing sales are above. We're actually seeing sales below where we were at this time. But when we look overall, when we look over broader trends, that's kind of how this comes to play, is that you didn't go right in, to the red here, but you're just not seeing the same pace that you were seeing in previous years, or previous periods, I should say. And then lastly is recession. Annual sales are below and they're declining at a rapid pace. This is where nobody wants to live. Nobody wants to live in the red. So when we look at the major industries, and I should have put this disclaimer out there earlier, I am not an economist. I am far from it. I'm definitely more on the marketing conceptual side, but hopefully, as I share some of the research that I've done, this will provide some insights and education, but, highly encourage everybody to speak with their financial advisors and accountants for their specific needs as far as what they want to do with their businesses and their money. money. But what I want to do is just simply share what we've learned in the marketplace. So when we look at the cycles, the blue to green to yellow to red is such an easy way for us to visualize it. We're seeing consumer prices at this peak, and our hope is that we are past this peak, that we're not going to see that continue to climb, and we're going to see that start to go down the hill on the other side. But all the businesses now, they're starting to experience this slow growth, and the forecast from the economists is they expect us to enter into a soft landing. A hard landing would be where we actually go into a recessionary period, kind of like what we experienced 10, 12 years ago. And that is not the forecast. So I think we certainly don't have a crystal ball. The economists don't have a crystal ball, but they have a lot of data and they do a ton of analysis and have an excellent track record of prediction. So I'm feeling relatively confident in what they're predicting, and I definitely hope that we go through the soft landing period, not the hard one. Okay, so I'm going to pause, Austin, and just see if any questions have come in before we dive into the ortho market.
Yes, we did not have any questions, just a comment that the Gators are going to smoke Utah their first game of the year.
You know, I hope not. But I love it.
Yes.
I have a good friend that is the chief alumni officer at the University of Utah, and she is taking a band of Utes out to Florida in a couple weeks. So hopefully we're going to have a good cheering session out there.
Love it.
Cute. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So let's jump into ortho. We know that the US population hovers somewhere around this number. We also estimate that about a third of that number is in need of orthodontic treatment. And we know our case starts are somewhere in the 3 to 4 million range, and, you know, definitely climbing. You know, while we're seeing a slowing over last year, we still see overall growth as a trend, and we'll talk about that too. So what this means is we have tons of opportunity, despite kind of how things are moving and what's happening. We are far from completely addressing everybody in the world that wants orthodontics. We have tons of growth. Many of you have probably seen this slide, but it's a valuable reminder. So yeah, another map of the United States. Is this all we're going to do? No, it's not. But I wanted to show this. You know, this is actually something we've generated through our Market Maps product. This shows how well served the population is by each state. This is also a couple of years old. So as you're seeing some of this migration, you're going to see a few changes in these numbers. So we'll continue to update this in an ongoing way. But look at your state. How well served is it? You know, Texas is one of the most well served, California. But outside of that, I mean, you're seeing less than 1% in many states. So in doing this analysis, I actually sliced and diced the data about 100 different ways. I spent weeks and weeks. I worked closely with Ryan on our team, who many of you know, and ultimately I'm coming to you all with the full USA aggregated data. All of this information that I'm sharing today is in Gauge. So for those of you that are Gauge clients, go to your yearly summary and you can look at this anytime you want. And I highly encourage you to do so, especially as months and quarters close. It's really meaningful to be able to look backward multiple years at a time. For those of you that don't have Gauge, you know, this will probably be a little bit more insightful and newer information, but just know we're talking about Gauge practices who generally outpace the industry. So one thing that I think we collectively are very proud of is Gauge practices keep an eye on their business metrics. They're looking at their new patient calls and starts and where their money is going and if their AR is creeping up or down. So they generally do a little bit better. They have their fingers on the pulse. And within our population, average practice size is 2 locations. We know many are single locations and some, you know, are many more than 2. So just keep that in mind as we look through this data, as you think about your own practice and how it may compare. So let's start at the top of the funnel. Something I've heard anecdotally in speaking with clients is referrals seem to be sort of waning. And I know that there's some component of maybe dental offices that are now starting to offer orthodontic treatment. Was there sort of a break in our ability to do PR and connect? But it's an area that I would say look at for your practice. New patients added, this is definitely concerning. This is the top of our funnel. People coming into our sales funnel down almost 8% when we look from January to June last year to this year. When we look more specifically at Q2, by the way, it actually hits harder. The first part of the year was slow going, but this summer has definitely, I think we've all felt that. It just hasn't been as busy. There's probably a little bit of us needing time and vacations and things like that because it was so busy last year. So I'm sure there's a combination of factors here. Maybe we're holding on to our money a little bit. So the top of funnel is something that I definitely want to illustrate for consideration. And we are going to talk about some solutions further down in the presentation. Okay, so now let's talk about exams. Exams are down, makes sense, right? You don't have as many people calling, so you don't have as many exams. But one thing to celebrate is our new patient call to exam conversion actually is up. So for those that are calling, maybe it's a bandwidth issue, maybe we have a little extra time to spend, but we're actually converting those calls to exams. It could also mean that if people are calling in, they're really serious shoppers. But both of those things need to be thought about internally in your practice so you can make use of that information. You can realize, man, yeah, people are holding on to their money, but if they're calling me like white glove service all the way, we're going to make it happen because they're probably serious. And likewise, if you're realizing, wow, spending 5 extra minutes on the phone is converting this call to an exam, I want to make sure that I'm staffed appropriately for that. So some things are good. Some things are bad, but all things typically can have action associated with them. Notable here too is your adult exams. That is huge. We're going to talk a little bit about that later as well, but this is really significant. We're seeing some declines in aligner share that I think we're still going to be realizing over the next period of time, if it's a quarter or two. But adults, primarily seeking aligners typically or some sort of aesthetic treatment, seeing that decline, that is really something that's noteworthy. As last year and even kind of Q4 of 2020, adults skyrocketed. I mean, they were in the 20s to 25% growth. The Zoom effect is something that Ryan talked about and we shared on a couple of different in a couple of different lectures. So have we seen that run its course, or is this more about a financial decision and priority? So something to think about for your specific market. Another area that I think is notable here is our case acceptance. So we're getting people into the exam, but we're just seeing a little bit of a hit. I mean, it's relatively flat, but seeing a little bit of a hit in case acceptance. We want to make sure we have quality processes in place for our TCs and ensuring that follow-up's being done and we're doing everything we can to keep that person in our practice. And we're going to talk more about that later. Our OBS pool, Mary Beth is the expert of all experts from our Impact 360 consulting team on how to manage your OBS program. Her entire team of consultants are absolute experts in this. While these numbers are not huge in the grand scheme of things, it's something that if your practice is doing really well in a lot of places, this can be sort of, it's like termites in the wall. If you're not watching it, if you're not thinking about it, it can, turn into a problem. I shouldn't say termites, it's not a big problem, but it's something where you're really kind of letting all these people that you've spent marketing dollars, time, energy, and you're just letting it kind of fade away, the leaky bucket issue. So the OBS program and seeing that we're having such a great decline in starts coming from OBS is also something of concern. Production and collections, this is totally expected. So we have less starts, our production is down. We had more starts last year. We're still realizing the fruits of our labor, so collections are slightly up. But it's important to be monitoring this and ensuring that our productions are running ahead of our collections to ensure the pipeline is stable going forward. The initial fee, that actually should be yellow. That's flat, and certainly it's probably just, some minor changes in down payments. And here's something that I want to high five everybody about. Last year, a big topic of conversation was to increase fees, stop giving as many discounts, leverage the fact that inflation is a thing, and also make sure that you're getting out ahead of it. So congratulations to everybody. The combination of these two is absolutely worth celebrating. And I think from a consumer standpoint, we do want to talk about price, but this is, when you look at the percent change here, it's meaningful to your bottom line in a great population, but to each individual person, it's not a huge hit. So I think overall very successful. And then the data revealed some interesting things to me that I didn't expect. We typically look at the top 5 of new patient calls, exam starts, productions, collections, kind of the lifeblood of the practice. But future exam schedule being flat means we have time in our schedule. When we see this going up, right, it means we're busier. So I didn't expect to see it go up. I kind of expected to see it go down. So I was surprised there. If we're not as busy, maybe our future exams, we have more time sooner, but no shows. And I'm sort of curious if you're feeling this as well, as his no shows, this big growing problem. It appears to be. Looking at the data, this is a huge time suck on your practice, and it eats up time in your schedule that you cannot recover once that, people just don't show up, that 30 minutes, 15, whatever it was, we can't get that time back. We can't get somebody else in that slot. So being proactive about our no-shows, having systems where we actually take action ahead of the call, which I know many of you do, but does that system need to be looked at? Do we need to review how it's being done? So I would certainly encourage you to look at this for your practice. An appointment schedule. So why this feels interesting to me. Is there a question?
That's for only 7 minutes.
Okay. Appointment scheduled also, this tells us we're having more appointments. We're less busy, but we have more appointments. So that's counter to what you would expect. So possibly kind of worth looking into our schedule. What are we doing? Are we seeing people more frequently? What's our reasoning? Do we need to think about technology? Do we need to think about products? What's going on here? Is it a result of having to reschedule people because of these no-shows? So definitely an interesting metric to look into there. And then lastly, celebratory. Active patients over ECD. So ECD is estimated completion. Why am I losing that? Duration? Date. Thank you so much. Thank you, Austin. Estimated completion date. So if we thought they were supposed to be done in a certain period of time, are they running over that time? During post-pandemic, after the shutdown, I shouldn't say post-pandemic, but after the shutdown, this skyrocketed. As expected, we had to finish people out. We weren't able to see them for 12 or 16 weeks. We are fighting back from that. So congratulations to all of you there. All right, so any questions or comments before we move on?
We just had a couple of practices say they are seeing a lot of no-shows, so that, yeah, definitely backs up that data.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. All right, so what do we do? And this is largely from our friends at ITR, the economists. If we are experiencing a slowing period, what do? Their guidance is to focus on preserving our margins. You're doing that. You are reducing your discounts. So keep that in mind. There's strategy to how we pull new patients in, and it's not always with discounts. It's not always how we close them. Sometimes it is, but focusing on preserving those margins is important. This one I found very insightful for us. if products are considered luxury, do we have lower cost alternatives to offer? I know some practices have been, innovating their pricing pipeline by doing like a 6-month smiles at a lesser fee, or doing an adult treatment that's just, kind of like general smile correction for the social 6 type of thing. This, to me, it was always sort of like, yeah, I mean, maybe that's interesting, I don't know. But in this time, it feels really interesting. And it's largely because adults have deprioritized themselves. Adults have largely deprioritized themselves as far as investing in their smiles. And we're seeing that in the data. So that could be an angle, that could be an idea that could be effective in your market. And, we're going to talk a little bit about direct to consumer and how that's playing in, but it's another way that you can compete there. And then, are there efficiencies? Are there things that you've been wanting to just peel back the onion and say, what's working, what's not? How do we retool ourselves to be better for the future? These slowing periods where we might have a little bit of time, we might have a little bit of bandwidth, it's a great time to ask ourselves, ask our team members, what's really not working in our practice. If you have Gauge, it's a great way to be able to see that visually, but that's not the only place. Talk to your team and see if there's some things that can help the benefit your business in the long run. And then finally, having a cool head, leveraging logic, thinking about how cyclical our economy is, looking back in time, doing research, reading articles, being in webinars like this. So just, panicking rarely results in a positive outcome. And I don't think anybody here is panicking, but it's a good reminder to just say, okay, we're just going to look at this with logic, and we're not going to freak out. We're not going to like hole up and board up our windows and hold on to all of our marketing money. We're just going to think logically about what's ahead for business. All right, so we've talked a little bit about, some things that feel painful and feel a little bit stressful. I also want to talk about the upside. Okay, so the sun still shines on us, and some of our customers, largely in orthodontics, we are working with a relatively stable customer base, people with decent incomes, in large part, obviously that is varies widely across the US in all of the markets, but there are certainly segments in every one of our markets where people may have been able to take advantage of some of the financial discord that's been going on. They're possibly in a better spot. Now, anybody that did really well as a result of this pandemic boom that happened is at more risk of being normalized now where we are, but consider that. Another forecast that we're going to talk more in detail about is that retail is not expected to crash. Retail is really closely associated to us because we are elective healthcare for the most part. So that's positive. The labor market. So the job hopping, that I think it's easy for us to sort of focus on our internal pain. Well, what that also means in the greater population is incomes are typically increasing. People aren't just job hunting because they say, forget this and throw their computer in the street. A lot of times that comes with an increase in income. So that's positive as well for expendable income. Our supply demand is beginning to balance. As I mentioned earlier, we're really hopeful that we are at or past this inflation peak. And the relief is absolutely expected to come in 23. Now, it ebbs and flows. We might see that starting in late 22. It might take until mid 23, but the relief is absolutely expected. And for anybody that is in a position of having healthy finances, the advice is to keep investing. So invest wisely, invest in ways where you can see a return greater than inflation. So following on, it's really not all doom and gloom. This is a 5-year look back. And again, easy to see all this in Gauge. And as I mentioned, we want to watch for that blue outpacing ahead of the orange. So we need to definitely keep our minds on our production and getting the new patients in. But what's so important about having data is being able to do this with it. Being able to visually look at this brings great perspective and where we are versus where we were a couple of years ago. And the last 2.5 years feel like 10, I think, to a lot of us. But without this period and being able to kind of level set ourselves, this perspective I found to be quite helpful. And, likewise with our new patients added, this is an area of focus. We need to talk about it. We need to do something. We shouldn't kick our feet up and just, say we're done with this, looks pretty good, let's move on. But how are you feeling in 2019? Was there sort of a sense in your gut that was uncomfortable, or was it a little bit more like, hey, things are going good and we're growing and we have more to do and we want to change this? That type of feeling is probably how we should be feeling right now. You can see our growth is still exceeding that, though when you look just only at last year, it hurts. And one of the things, we won't get into a debate about the media, but the media likes to kind of make a big deal about this stuff, as they should. It's worth discussion, but I think more so as a broader view of what's really happening so we can make these logical decisions. And one little plug for any of you that have had a chance to listen to the leaky bucket presentation. That is so meaningful as you look at your new patients, to your exams, to your starts, the waterfall of fall off. So when we see how many people are calling us versus how many come to exam versus how many start, this is an area, this is a system within the business that should kind of always be a topic of conversation in your monthly meetings with your leadership team. We know there's going to be some fall off, it's appropriate, but we always want to be keeping our eyes on that. And are we within the benchmarks? Okay, let's shift gears and talk about how people are feeling. What are some consumer attitudes? Before we do that, Austin, I'll just pause and see if we had any questions.
Yeah, we do have one question I just want to address. Had several people ask me about the recording. We will send that out via email to everyone who's registered. And then I'll also post it in our Facebook Gauge users group. So if you are a Gauge user, I would recommend joining that on Facebook. We post content, webinars, events, and just development updates in there. So and that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry, one more question that just came in. Do we have the leaky bucket presentation available? We could probably post that in the users group as well. And potentially
it is on our current Facebook videos page. So not the users group, but just the broad Facebook. We did a presentation on that I think we've done a couple in 2020 and 2021. So it could be found there under the video section.
Okay, perfect.
Or we can also do a fresh one. Maybe it's high time we do a new one.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so we won't beat a dead horse. Consumers are feeling cautious. They are focusing spending more on needs, but they're also it doesn't mean people aren't spending money. I mean, BMWs are still being sold and people are still going on vacations, but the sort of craze that I think we all felt last year, people had been cooped up, they had money, there was stimulus, there was all these things creating a perfect storm. That is what I think has really changed with consumer attitudes. So they're being a lot more cautious. And with that, I tried to think of sort of an analogy here, but when you've sort of gone on a spending spree, imagine how you feel after. You might have buyer's remorse. You might be super pleased. You might feel like that was the best experience. But are you feeling like going out and doing that again? You just went on the best roller coaster ride. It was awesome. Do you want to jump back on? Some people do. Some people are like, I'm good. So we're experiencing some of that apathy. And at the same time, when the pandemic hit, marketers just went hard. How are we going to stay afloat? We're going to lose all these sales. What's going to happen? Marketers went hard. People couldn't spend, but they spent all this time researching. Then they finally bought. Well, the marketers just kept coming at you. And I think people are, just feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the decision fatigue that comes from overstimulation. So that's something to consider. This I found to be probably the most fascinating and the thing I'm latching on to the most. New research published through Forbes said consumers are seeking inspiration. And 44% of consumers are more superstitious or thinking about things beyond logic and reason right now. So this is really very interesting to me, because we sort of saw consumers go into a self-help, how do I make myself feel better amongst all this stress? There's all these health concerns. There's nothing more grave than the deaths and the worry around health of ourselves, our loved ones, kids, parents. And so kind of last year when we spoke on this, it was about, how do I have self-care? Do I go hiking? Do I, get a pedicure once a week? Whatever it may be, that's kind of where people's minds are. Well, now as they reemerge into the market in whatever way, they're kind of like, what's connecting with me? What inspires me? And what I find exciting about this is how lucky are we to be in an industry that naturally inspires. All of you are making beautiful smiles. You are changing lives. You are giving people something they cannot get anywhere else for themselves, an investment in themselves. So it's self-care, it's self-inspiration, and as many of you that I know, you yourselves are inspiring people. So if insurance can inspire people, and if toilet paper can inspire people, I think we are really well suited to do well with this insight. So kind of fascinating. Think about it, chew on it. I'm excited about it. And lastly, excellent experiences. I don't think that is a big surprise, but it can't go without your attention. When people call your practice, when people come to your practice, when people engage with your team, with yourselves, the expectation of excellent experiences is pretty high. And we've seen the news with people going crazy on airline flights, and service workers not being treated with respect. So there's an expectation that everybody wants to be treated kindly and nicely, and these excellent experiences can just make the biggest difference. And that's not news, but it's something to be reminded of. When we think about what's inside our practices and the team members, Orthodontics offers this amazing work-life balance. And every time I get the chance to work with teams, and Austin can speak to this too, she joined us from a practice, there is a really healthy work-life balance. And the culture that is offered in orthodontics is really special. So I think it's worth having that conversation. It's worth reminding ourselves, we have something special in orthodontics. But we also know, personal stresses, health concerns, other job opportunities, and just kind of the standard turnover. This can be kind of a source of stress, and labor shortage is for sure an issue. People are holding out on spending money. It's just the way it is right now. We need to be smart. We need to be strategic. Supplies. So we are easing up on shortages, but prices have been rising pretty much across the board. So scrutinize that. Watch your cash flow. Do you need to place this big order? Do you want to think about maybe waiting for another time? And then adults and DTC competition. I think this is, we've already sort of touched on this. There is an emotional component to decisions being made, and there's an urgency component. So adults are scrutinizing their spending. They're worried about gas and eggs and their kids' braces and so on and so forth. They're far less likely at this moment in time to spend on themselves. But if the phone call comes, if they're there, that is, you need to pounce. You basically need to make the most of that time that you have with the people that are calling in that are prospects, especially in the adult market, because it's fleeting, it's emotional, and that decision fatigue is going to come in. They're going to say, forget it, I'm not going to do it. So keep that in mind. And the lower cost options that we discussed. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving a little bit here. I don't think we need to beat the dead horse. This is just a model that shows you a predictive index. It uses a rolling average 12 months over 12 months to allow us to kind of see into the future about what is expected to happen. This is the slowing growth in retail sales. I think it's relatively positive. The recession is not expected. And then this morning on the news, on the financial news, they were talking about this July reporting 8.5% above last July in the consumer price index. This is simply illustrating what we know. But again, what I want to point to is when we look back in time, this is 20-year history, we're off the charts. But this is actually the fourth time in 120 years we've seen inflation at this level. So again, the cyclicality of it, and the market tends to be moving at a little bit faster pace, which is interesting, and the relief is expected to come. More of the same. This is why people are holding on to their money. Okay, this last slide on the economy I did want to share because healthcare is a broad category. We fall into healthcare, but we have our own ebbs and flows, and it's often sort of in the wake of medical. So there are mild declines expected, possibly recession in mid-2023. So when I'm thinking about all of you, if you have some big equipment purchases, I might keep my eyes on this. Where supply is short right now, prices are pretty high. Is your business in a place where you absolutely need that equipment? Okay, fine. If not, if you have the luxury of waiting, I would wait. Keep your eyes on it, and I would follow this into 2023 if you can. All right, so now we've kind of seen the lay of the land. What are we going to do about this? First, I think, is focusing on data and having a data culture. Play. We're going to talk a little bit about relaxing and playing and what that means. I want to show you your funnel, and we're going to get through this in hopefully 12 minutes. We're going to talk about managing your funnel, and then we're going to talk about different systems in your office. And we're going to talk about some different strategies to deal with the different systems in your office. So first and foremost, I would highly recommend building a data-driven culture. And this is actually pretty easy when you have a product like Gauge. If you have software like Gauge that has all the visuals and the pretty colors and different permissions for each member of the team, it can kind of be your hub to build that culture, and it's not a mountain to climb. Even if you don't have Gauge, that's fine. Excel is a magical tool. Any kind of data that you can get your hands on will provide clarity and unity across your team. When you're all looking at numbers, it helps to disseminate perceptions. And sometimes maybe if there's a really loud voice or somebody's, passionate about something, the numbers level us out onto the same playing field. It improves communication, and it minimizes your management. Rather than saying, hey, I think this is happening, or I feel like, or we need to, we are looking at numbers together, and we are now collectively problem solving. So the management takes a little bit off the shoulder of the practice owner. And as we talked about at the top of the presentation, we have more opportunities for celebration. We can see things going well. We can pass out some bonuses. We can have a party. We can go do, a day out or team building because we're achieving our goals. So there's so much value in a data-driven culture. And all the stuff that we talked about, I'm bringing these numbers back up because it's all in Gauge. It's easy, and it's a matter of creating a habit. So the biggest issue facing businesses of all sizes and all types, it's clarity and focus. Being able to see what's going on, see where things are working and where they're not working. The clarity and focus that brings a lot of peace, honestly. So, having software, having automated data solves a lot of probably what feels overwhelming there. Doesn't have to be 80 metrics. It doesn't have to be 40 spreadsheets. Pick 3, pick 5. And while the software takes a lot of the hard work out of it for us, we've got to have the humans. The humans must be able to do something about this. Otherwise, it's just data, right? So having the information cross-functionally to various aspects of your business, your leadership team, your front desk, your admin, everybody that's involved, that's where organizations are going to see the most value. And as I said, you know, if it's 5 minutes a day, if it's 5 minutes a week, just create a habit. Just commit to yourself every admin day, every Friday, whatever it may be, every Saturday morning over coffee. I'm gonna look at my business. I'm not exactly going to expect myself to do something with that. I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to look at it again. And what's going to start happening is you're going to start to see trends. You're going to start to have insights come up. Okay, play is the next thing. It's partially because of this stress vibe that we're feeling, but it's also largely because we do our best thinking when we are at play. And it also contributes greatly to the notion of finding ways to inspire within our own team. Like, first, let's start at home. You know, I love orthodontics because I think so many of us are kind of naturally inclined to be playful people. But there's just a lot of current market reasons why we should be reminded about this. You know, your prospective patients coming in, they feel your culture, they feel what's going on. And having a more playful culture is a more welcoming culture. And I also want you, as you're looking at your data, as you've created your habit, when you find yourself in play, when you find yourself at your most relaxed state, that's often where flow comes. And flow is that period of like easy thinking. Ideas are coming to you. You feel inspired yourself. So taking these moments, giving yourself permission, doing some of this with your team, you are going to find yourself in a place of greater internal inspiration, more innovative ideas, hopefully feeling a little happier, as you should, you know, knowing what's kind of going on in the market. And this book is one I've listened to twice now, and I probably do for a third time. It's such a great reminder, also for parents, and how play really shapes the brain. And if we think about little kids and how they're trying and learning, it's just super, super meaningful for growth. So I wanted to throw this to all of you for consideration as well. All right, next on our list is managing our funnel. So this is the marketing funnel. You have the top, middle, and bottom. The top is your awareness. The middle is your consideration, which is where I think a lot of the market is parked on a lot of things right now. And then you have your bottom of funnel where people have actually expressed interest. And I'm going to add in here the starts or the sales part of your funnel, which is its own funnel, right? So once we get people hearing about us, thinking about us, calling us, now they're actually in our practice or they're on the phone with us, we actually need to manage that funnel as well. Being strategic in our marketing is what's critical and important here, and making sure that we have the proper handshake between our marketing and our sales, which is our frontline, front desk, and TC. These two things must be cohesive and strategically managed in this moment in time. This is one of the systems I would say I highly encourage you to look at. Many of you have seen this. This is the orthodontic patient journey. It's a way of illustrating to you what the funnel can look like and how people kind of go through these various places to learn about us, understand us. This is not a marketing presentation. We're not going to talk in detail about this. This is simply to illustrate that it can be complicated, right? There's a lot to manage and navigate. But having systems in place where you can actually look at what's working, What are we getting an ROI? That's what's critical here. Not knowing like, is this place where I have to be? Do I have to be on social media every single day? No, that's not the answer per se. The answer is to look at what you're doing in your practice and ensure that you have systems of measurement. So in declining times, you might be tempted to just hold on to your money like it feels like everyone else is. It's counterintuitive to spend a lot of money marketing when people aren't willing to spend their money with you. But this is where your critical thinking comes into play. And as we sort of discussed, if this is a period of time where you can say growth is our issue, growth is our system, I want to peel back the onion. I want to look at how we're tackling this, and I want to be smart about it. Definitely don't just say I'm reeling back all my dollars on marketing. That is the wrong thing to do in this moment in time, but you're also going to have to be willing to commit to the long game. You're not going to get, all these leads tomorrow because you turned on a marketing program. That is always the case. In the best of times, you turn on a marketing program, and because it's the best of times, people know about you and they call. In these slowing times, you turn on a marketing program, you need to kind of let it do its work. And that is top of funnel work in some cases while people swim around in the consideration place. And I just have to throw this in here because social media is not real marketing. Sometimes we think, oh, I need to do marketing. Okay, we're going to start posting on social. Posting on social is a great way to connect. It's a great way to engage. It's a great way to show who you are, but it is not strategic marketing. So I simply just kind of want to point that out. We have lots of resources on our Facebook and even on gauge.com about some activities that can be done as it relates to marketing. Reach out to our consulting team as well if you need some help with that. And at Gauge, we have a tool. Market Maps is, demographic analysis of your local market. We look at where you're being successful. We look at your local market. We marry those two things together. So if you have any interest in Market Maps, of course, please reach out to our team. So kind of in our final segment, talking about the systems, what really needs to be scrutinized? There are always multiple ways to approach achieving a goal. In this case, we're looking at digging a hole, and you can do it with a shovel, you can do it with your hands, or you can rent or buy, one of these big backhoes. The time, energy, and resources that go into each one of these varies greatly. So what's working and what's not, I think, is what's critical to understand. Did you buy a backhoe, but you really could have dug this hole with a shovel? Look at this. Look at this in your practice. Or vice versa. Are you digging a hole with your hands? You're spending so much time and energy and resources doing something. It's taking so much time to get this far. Do you need to upgrade? What you've been doing in the past doesn't mean it's exactly the right way to be going forward. So I'm encouraging you to talk with your teams and think through, the various business systems. And I'm sure I've missed some areas here. I was trying to think through, the major categories and also operate within my 4-category slide template. But these are some of the major systems. Now, as we start to wrap up, and I think I have 3 or 4 minutes, if you can hang in there with me, we have an app for that. So what gets measured gets managed. A lot of what you're seeing in these various systems can be quickly illustrated visually using Gauge. So if you are new to Gauge, I highly encourage you to reach out to our team to learn more about how it can impact your practice, how it can help you understand what's working and what's not, and where to celebrate. These are some of the major categories that we address. Gauge also provides some efficiency tools that help with other areas of your practice. So your intake, if this is an area where you're still mailing forms or you're emailing PDFs and that type of thing, and you want to think about going digital, we have a digital forms product. The administrative area, overhead, where you're spending your money, hopefully is of big interest to you right now. It definitely is for most people, and being able to forecast for your business. So these are administrative areas. Maybe you work with an accountant, maybe you work with a consultant, but that's certainly an area I know as a business owner, it's important to keep eyes on a regular basis. Sometimes I hear, doctors are only looking at their finances maybe once a quarter, once a year. And, it makes me cringe. You've got to be looking at your money more regularly than that. So whether it be through our tools or through others, just keep your eyes on that, especially in this time. And the growth team, right now, probably one of your most critical areas. It sounds pretty cliche, but it is not something to pull your dollars back or your resources back. This is the time actually to invest. And when we think about the fall off between new patients down to starts, case acceptance of 60 or 70%, we want to make sure that if we're spending marketing dollars and we're getting people to call us, we have systems in place to manage this as effectively as we possibly can. A new product that Gage is going to be launching in the next, let's say 2 months, maybe a little sooner than that. Hopefully, cross your fingers with me, is our new patient tracker. So from before the exam, from the time the person calls, you've got your forms, and now you're able to track the progress of these patients all the way through. So you can see about insurance verification. Did we do a 48-hour introductory call to welcome them, to remind them of their appointment? Do we have their forms filled out? A complete task manager that takes your practice from maybe the analog days to full digital days, where not only do you have a task manager that keeps everybody in touch of these moving pieces and parts, the different roles throughout the practice, helps the TC manage their day, what's coming today, what's coming next week, who do I need to call, all the way through to the payment presentation and contract signing. So this is something we are super excited about. It has been a long time in the works. It's a dream come true for a lot of us. This QR code, you can pop open your phone if you want to learn more about this and get on our demo schedule. We do have relatively limited capacity to get people going on this product, but we're super excited and very, very much looking forward to talking to you more about it. So that is our new patient tracker. And to wrap up, we just want to talk about the different parts of the practice where Gage can help. From the top of your funnel in reaching your community, all the way through to your clinical efficiency, Gage is there to support activity for each of the major systems and major roles in your practice. And if you need help in developing new systems, in new software, roles and accountability, some deep dives into Gage, or onboarding new team members, our Impact 360 consultants are what I like to call the Navy SEALs. They can really get in, and years and decades of experience working in practices and helping them achieve their vision. Okay, sales pitch over. But we do love to help, and we want to make sure everybody knows about all the different ways that we can help. So what are our key takeaways as we look ahead? The second half of 22 into 23 will continue into the slowing growth with a soft landing. Inflation is expected to subside into 23, but I highly encourage you to consider your pricing strategy in the short term. This is an area where I wouldn't lower prices. I wouldn't do something that serious, but I might run a promotion. I might do a social 6. I might think about something like that, where you have a lower cost option to kind of keep your adult funnel and keep some of that revenue coming in. From a marketing strategy standpoint, marketing to adults right now, it's just going to take more work. It doesn't mean you shouldn't. But it's going to take more work. So if that's been big for you, and if it's still working, fabulous, and congratulations. If you're seeing that waning, you may want to consider families and kids. We're just seeing a lot more consistency and stability there. The growth is expected to return to phase B, our green phase, in 2024 in many industries. I say that cautiously. I'm not, ready to sign up for that, but I'm hopeful that that's where things will head. At the same time, our labor shortages are expected to last all the way through next year. With that in mind, team retention, I think, is an important detail we didn't talk too much about today, but making sure that you are taking good care of those that are on your team, I think it's critical. And that's a matter of culture. That's a matter of money, certainly. It's a matter of growth opportunity. It depends, each of us is unique in that way, but put your arms around your team and keep them close and help them with their career goals and supporting you. The economists are predicting a recession in 26 and a depression in 2030. This is pretty serious, I think, something that I'm definitely taking to heart. And with that in mind, the advice that's been given is to invest wisely in the next 3 to 5 years. If that be real estate, things that can become liquid, but while things are still relatively good, slowing growth is still good. It's time to think about investing, and that again is a little counterintuitive to I think what we feel. To me, it's worth considering. The data-driven culture, looking at your systems, the retention of your team members, which we did touch on, and look for technology solutions. Where can you find automation and increased efficiencies? Where are there good reasons to invest in your business right now? There's probably some really great opportunities with a little bit of bandwidth and free time as you are peeling back the systems. Where does technology play in? What's the future? And finally, please find time for play and inspiration, personally and professionally. I hope you can find that. With that, we conclude, and apologies for going over, but I'll stay on for questions as long as everybody else wants to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Suzanne. We did have one question about Canadian numbers. I just want all Gauge users to know in the top right corner of your dashboard, there's a comparison dropdown. And we have data for Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the US. So you can select your region there and just look at all of that data in your dashboard. So, and then I did find the leaky bucket video. I will include that in the follow-up email with the recording of this webinar as well. So be on the lookout for that. Some people say it goes to their spam folder. So if you don't see it, just check your spam folder. Okay, awesome. I think that was all the questions. Let me double check. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, well, actually, sorry, one more.
Oh, yeah.
Where is the data from for post-recession and depression? Am I reading that?
Okay, perfect. That's I was going to my sources page. So those links obviously aren't clickable to you all, but it is, those are 2 Forbes articles. And then the ITR trends report is where all of that, sorry, remind me, what was the chart they were looking for?
I believe this is to say post-recession and depression.
Yeah.
Where's the data from that pulled?
That was from the ITR trends report.
Awesome. Sounds good. Okay. I think that's everything. Anybody else have any more questions? Let me scroll through these, make sure I didn't miss any.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate you joining us probably over your lunch break. So we hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Suzanne.